An Extra Knife at Dinner, a Gabrielle Ibrahim mystery. An audio series by Patricia Asedegbega Nieto. Episode 4. Chooks looked at Gabrielle and stopped himself from letting out an impatient retort. This so-called Antonia belonged in jail. What on earth was all the hesitation for? She was a textbook psychopath, a criminal. There was no way to sugarcoat what she had done. Toxic people had to be cut out of one's life. That was his motto. But looking at the distraught woman as she paced around in circles gave him an idea. "It's late. Let me drop you at home." "I'd like to meet this Antonia. Perhaps a course of action will be clearer then." Gabrielle looked at him, and after a moment of hesitation she nodded and got into his car, giving him the address. Chooks drove to the house in silence, wondering why on earth he was getting involved when the sane thing to do would be to walk away. There was no tiny bit of him that wanted any part in the drama, especially when he had a strong feeling that they were dealing with a dangerous person. Still, he wasn't comfortable leaving Gabrielle in that state of distress either. His mind wandered to the clinic and the patients he was concerned about. They occupied his thoughts for the rest of the drive. The gate was opened by a security guard, and Chooks drove inside the impressive grounds. When she had told him who her family was, he recalled that they were very well-to-do, but he wasn't one to be impressed by all that he was seeing. He followed the woman up the stairs. She knocked on a door and went in, and he waited for her to come back out. A few minutes later, she opened the door. A dark-skinned young woman stood looking at him in a hostile manner. Clearly, the wait had eliminated the remorse she felt for trying to kill her half-sister. She returned her attention away from him and back to Gabrielle. "You can't keep me locked up forever," she exclaimed in anger. "I've told you everything I know. It was a simple error of judgment. I soon came back to my senses. Are you seriously going to have me arrested because of that? Most people have had murderous ideas about their siblings at one point or another. You're making too big a deal of this." Chooks studied the younger woman as she pushed back a strand of the hairpiece she was wearing. He would have found the scene entertaining, but a glance at Gabrielle sobered him up. "Look, Antonia, you don't know me, and my desire to get to know you is disappearing with every second I spend in your presence," he began. "Those people who have had those thoughts you speak of mostly did so as kids. They either grew out of them or learned to control them. I read the messages, and there were months of exchanges in which plans were made. The perfect moment was looked for, and the only reason why Gabrielle's not dead has nothing to do with the clear intent of the many messages here. An opportunity simply hadn't come up, at least not one that would divert suspicion completely from you. There's no money in your bank account that could keep you from spending a very, very long period of time in jail. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to answer each and every single question we ask you. Then, if I'm satisfied that you're telling the truth, I'll make a call to a friend of mine that has a facility in which women that need to get away can stay in hiding. If he accepts you, you'll work there without any connection to the outside world until we can clear this up. Now, it looks like you're about to open your mouth and protest. I suggest you think twice before speaking again, because the only other option you have is for us to call the police this very moment, and then, from one instant to the next, life as you know it will be over. Antonia, what will it be?" Both women stared at him, Gabrielle particularly in shock. He hadn't told her what he had been thinking of. Antonia sat on the bed, realization probably setting in of just how deep a hole she had got herself into. He didn't care. For some reason, his protective instincts had kicked in. It was obvious that had he not come back with her, things could have ended really badly for Gabrielle. From Antonia's body language, he was almost certain that had he not been present, she would not have hesitated to launch a physical attack. "For how long will I be in that place?" Antonia finally asked. "Until we get to the bottom of this," Chooks said. "And I want to make something very clear. There's no guarantee that you won't be arrested at the end of this. But believe me, this is your best chance. Right now we have no idea what the person you were in contact with is up to. Will he or she come to finish the job? Did they try to do so at the party? Bear in mind, Antonia, that Gabrielle's injury was documented by the police and could have been fatal. So either you cooperate, or you could be facing a charge of attempted murder. Again, what will it be? Chooks fixed the stare his mother often said could melt a block of ice onto Antonia. "Make the call." "I'll go," the younger woman replied quietly. He walked out, feeling Gabrielle's eyes on him. A few minutes later he returned. The women were arguing as he entered. "I've told you, I don't know who this person is," Antonia was insisting. "I was given a piece of paper with the number, which I'm sure you've tried to call, and have also found it to be disconnected. It was a burner phone." "We'll start from the beginning," Chooks commanded. "The burner phone and the bank transactions can be traced by the police, so that's not the issue now. How did all this start? I can tell after having spent a few minutes in this room that there's been a great deal of animosity between you both. The family drama concerns me less, but walk us through the moment you decided it would be a good idea to kill Gabrielle, and the steps you took to do that. Don't leave a single detail out. My friend has agreed to let you work there, and you'll be on cleaning duties. We leave in an hour. Start speaking." "Cleaning? I can't do that," Antonia complained, but did not say another word regarding her new career path after taking a look at his face. "Okay. The thought first implanted itself during my mother's trial. I mean, in a serious way. It hit me then that we'd be better off without them. It felt like I didn't exist and wasn't part of their world. They testified and didn't even put in a good word for her, not caring how things would affect me." Gabrielle gasped and shook her head at Antonia's words, but remained silent. "Then there was the sentencing," Antonia continued. "I watched her being taken away, and I had to go back to the house because my mother had told me not to move from there. It was my rightful place, and no one was allowed to take it away from me. Then Gabrielle started coming more and more often, and I just started thinking more and more about it. I understand that for her it was like a new beginning with her mother, and that every little moment they spent together was precious. But to me, it was a constant reminder of all that I had lost. Like I was being stabbed by their happiness, over and over again. So you feel that your mother destroying my family and keeping me as far away from my father as possible during my entire childhood, keeping my mother locked up. Her plan probably being to do so until the day she died. You seriously believe that after all that, we should have spoken up for her at the trial? Testified that she was a model citizen?" Gabrielle had spoken for the first time in a while, and Chooks looked from one sister to the other. He could see how the actions of their parents had shaped the lives of both sisters. He wanted to get all the details from Antonia, but he was beginning to understand that more was needed from him, and dealing with feelings, especially as raw as these, had never been his thing. He decided to treat it like he would if a patient came into his office with a complicated diagnosis, in a cold, detached way, in order to solve the enigma. Gabrielle felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold through a window. Antonia and she had never talked about what had happened to all of them. Gabrielle had tried to initiate a conversation on various occasions, but her efforts had been met with silence, Antonia walking out on her or rude replies. She had tried to put herself in her half-sister's place, wondering how she felt, but listening to her now, it hit her that an already very confused and resentful person had felt even more isolated after all had been said and done. She waited for Antonia to answer her question. "Yes, I expected my father to speak up for the woman he'd shared more than 20 years with," Antonia retorted angrily. "I'm also his daughter. He just moved on to a new family." Gabrielle was at a loss for words for a second. It felt like she had to justify her relief at recovering her mother and excuse Deborah's actions, even though they had been terrible and very destructive. She was looking for a way to put her thoughts into words when the doctor spoke. "Antonia, regardless of how the matter was handled, you need to at least admit if not to anyone else, but at least to yourself, that your mother knowingly committed very serious crimes. I don't know the whole story, but from what I've understood from listening to you both, your mother decided to separate a family, keep a woman captive, and send her daughter as far away as possible. And you were encouraged to develop an animosity towards her throughout the years. Did you go and visit your mother? Did she tell you that you had to do something?" Antonia looked pensive for a moment as Gabrielle waited. The room had gone deadly quiet. The screen of Gabrielle's phone lit up with a call from Sandra. It was definitely not the time to pick up. She looked at Antonia, who lifted the mattress and unzipped its cover. She then took out a letter and handed it over to Gabrielle. Gabrielle sat down before she opened it. Something told her that she would need to. Deborah's neat handwriting hit her, almost in a physical manner, memories resurfacing of the way the woman had treated her in the past. As Gabrielle tried to push them away, she said a mental prayer to steady herself and ask for wisdom, so she would not scream out everything that she was feeling, because that was all she wanted to do. The letter was composed of 3 pages, in which, after barely asking how her daughter was holding up despite her life being turned upside down, Deborah gave Antonia careful instructions about how to secure her legacy. In the letter, Deborah repeated that it would be better for everyone if Gabrielle and her mother were not in the picture. Deborah told her that sometimes one had to make hard choices for the greater good. Gabrielle felt a cold shiver go down her spine. In Deborah's mind, she and her daughter had a right to everything. How could people just make up those kinds of realities and not have any feelings at all, or show any remorse? Antonia had purposely hidden this particular letter separately. Hence, Gabrielle had not found it during the search she had conducted earlier on. It was also the most explicit and damaging for mother and daughter. Why Antonia had not destroyed it, as Deborah asked her to, was something Gabrielle did not understand. "When did you decide to act on it?" Gabrielle asked. "Funke and I had been at a club, and I'd had quite a bit to drink," Antonia admitted. "That evening you'd been in to see your mother and father, and Alex had come to pick you up. That had really annoyed me, so I was saying out loud that something had to be arranged, some kind of accident. I went to the bathroom, and when I was retouching my makeup, a woman came in and handed me a slip of paper with a number. She said I was to call that number and leave a message when I was ready to take care of my little problem. I remember looking at it and I just put it in my bag. But the day of the party, the one I didn't want to attend but father insisted I did, I heard him say that it felt like time had stood still for 27 years and that finally the clock had started ticking again. I saw you and Sandra, Alex, your group. You were all so happy. I went outside and made the call. I left a message, and the next day I got a reply. You've read them all. But I changed my mind, I did."
"How do we know that you didn't simply speak to this person through a different means and that the plan was still on? That those messages aren't a smokescreen for in case you got caught?" Chooks asked. "And who was the woman that passed you the number?"
Antonia spoke frantically, looking from one to the other. "I didn't. This was the only means of contact I had. I tried to undo it, I did. I even went back to the club to see if I could find the woman who gave me the number. But if I saw her again, I didn't recognize her." Gabrielle, in turn, searched the face of the other woman, willing to find something to hold on to. "I saw from your messages that you transferred 5 million naira. You were all set to go. Why did you change your mind, Antonia? Surely you understand how difficult it is for me to believe a single word you're saying, considering your track record." Antonia, for the first time since Gabrielle had known her, had tears in her eyes. She blinked and looked away. It seemed both sisters had inherited the trait of not showing weakness from their father. "It was a day that I came back with a terrible hangover from a party. Your mother was home, and she helped put me to bed. She snuck me past father, who doesn't waste an opportunity to compare me to my mother. She brought me chicken soup, and I could tell that she'd made it herself. I heard her call someone to cancel an appointment, and she said that her daughter was ill. She didn't disturb me or anything, but I knew that she was there if I needed her. It hit me then that I couldn't do that to her. I couldn't hurt her in such a way. No one had ever done that for me. I mean, to show that much concern, even after the terrible way I kept treating her. So I called. You can see the number of times I did on that day. I sent messages practically every day, and I did try to dissuade you from going to that party. But I saw that you were bent on going. I knew Bisola's parents had been invited, so I went to their house, put something in their food, and we were sent to represent them.
Gabrielle gasped and glanced at Chooks, who raised an eyebrow.
Antonia, the more you speak, the more you scare me. What did you give them? The doctor asked.
Oh, don't worry, it was all under control. Just a mild laxative. Anyway, I got there, mingled a bit, paid the waitress to keep an eye on your glass and fill it up before anyone else did, looked around, and when you arrived, we left.
Antonia smirked.
Really, Gabrielle, if someone tried to kill you, then you have more enemies than you think. You must not be as good a person as you think you are.
Right, write down who was with you the day you were given the number, the name of the club, and pack a bag. We're leaving, Chooks said as he observed the girl, his gaze not flinching. I'll be keeping your phone, and you'll be there for a while, so get used to the idea. Antonia, should you be responsible for the attempted murder of Gabrielle, I will be going straight to the police, irrespective of what your sister decides to do. Also, I need your other phones. Judging by the contents of this one, it can't be the main one.
A moment later, she produced 2 more phones.
Why would I go with you? I don't know you from anywhere. How do I know that this isn't a plot to get rid of me? No, I'm going nowhere with you.
Antonia stubbornly folded her arms.
Fine. The inspector said I was to call him if anything new came up, and I believe this falls into that category.
The doctor took out his wallet and brought out a card and his phone, and Antonia looked at Gabrielle, mouth wide open.
Wait. Fine. I'll do what you say, but you better prove my innocence, Gabrielle, she said. You can't go to daily mass and then choose to ignore the truth just because it's convenient to do so. You'll come with me now. There's no way I'm getting in a car with someone I've just met that intends on driving me to an unknown destination. If something were to happen to me, there should at least be a witness other than this man who can say, she was last seen.
You returned my call rather late last night, and you've been awfully quiet since you got here. Are you sure everything's fine? Gabrielle forced a smile as Sandra's eyes scrutinised her. She was not ready to share what had occurred in the previous days, especially since she was still trying to wrap her head around everything. I just have a lot on my mind. Sorry I couldn't spend more time with you yesterday, but your apartment's been given a thorough cleaning and your fridge is packed with your favourite food from your favourite restaurant. Okra soup and all. At the mention of her favourite soup, Sandra's face lit up, and Gabrielle turned towards the small suitcase she was helping her pack to avoid answering more questions. Miss Ibrahim, Dr. Agechi has gone into surgery. He said I was to tell you that he won't be able to see you right now. Nurse Bissy said from the doorway. Thank you. I'll call him later then. Nurse Bissy, I got this for you. I didn't want to give it to you in front of your colleagues, but you've been very kind to us, and I know that we're leaving Mark in good hands. Gabrielle handed the gift bag to the woman, who gasped and covered her mouth when she opened it. Oh, this is too much. I won't say you shouldn't have because I'm so happy. I can't show anyone here, but my neighbour must see this. She's always calling me to show off her new acquisitions. This time I'll ask her to take a seat first so she doesn't fall down from the shock. Thank you so much. Nurse Bissy grinned as she alternated between hugging the bag and studying every inch of it. I don't know if I'd show your neighbour.
Sandra warned. "She sounds like the kind of person that would orchestrate a breaking and entering just to get her hands on that bag and then console you afterwards." "Believe me, I just suffered a very painful loss, and I don't know if I'll ever recover. You know, Gabby, I've been thinking about the way that woman came straight for my bag. Maybe the plan was to get it, and the jewellery was just a bonus. Mine was a bespoke piece, worth millions of naira. People are so wicked." The nurse left the room, still emitting exclamations as Gabrielle made an effort not to laugh out loud at the forlorn look on Sandra's face. "Come on, let's go and say goodbye to Mark before you start planning a funeral for the bag. If I didn't know better from the look on your face, I'd think you'd lost your best friend or something." Gabrielle hooked her arm through Sandra's and they left the room, Gabrielle wheeling the suitcase behind her. Mark was in his room and he beamed when they went in. Sandra rushed to the side of her beloved, probably struggling to push away the memories of her much-cherished bag. Definitely to be revisited later. Luckily, his mother was nowhere in sight. Gabrielle said hello to the man and exchanged a few pleasantries with him. "Any news from the police, Mark? Any suspects apprehended?" she asked. "I spoke to the inspector in charge of the case this morning. Nothing concrete yet. There are a number of gangs operating in the city at the moment, so they have their hands full." He did seem quite stressed, probably from the many calls he was getting from the VIPs that attended the party. "We've cooperated fully, given him the guest list." "Are they investigating us now?" Sandra asked. "Well, I get that they have to look into every possibility, but though attendance was strictly by invitation, almost everyone from your social circle knew about it. So if I were an armed robber, it would be a very lucrative job. By the way, Mark, who invited the press?" "I've no idea," Mark replied. "Mum was livid when she found out that they were there. I believe that they belong to a particular agency that takes pics, interviews people, and then sells the content exclusively to some news outlet or another. She wanted to have them thrown out, but they pointed out that they had already spoken to some guests, and she should let them be. They already had material to sell anyway. I believe she got them to erase a few non-flattering photos of herself and take new ones in exchange for their staying." He finished speaking just as Alex walked in. Gabrielle smiled at him, and he smiled in return. "How's your mum?" Gabrielle asked him. "She's fine. That fall could have been much worse," Alex replied. "She's been taking things easy, catching up on her favourite telenovelas and resting. I spoke to the inspector today, and I have no clue on what happened. Mark, do you know if there were more people that attended than those invited? I know someone called my office to confirm. I didn't know everyone, of course, but I'm sure there was some form of control." "Ugh, I have no idea, really," Mark said. "Your mum was at the table with the impressive 5. One of them came with her daughter. Then there was my sister's table, one for the couples my family's always hung out with, the one my parents and family were at, and ours. I barely noticed most people. Honestly, I was trying to greet everyone, but I can't even remember who I said hello to. There was a point at which the party planner disappeared, and I was unceremoniously sent to the entrance to meet and greet, but I just put on a smile and welcomed them. I didn't have the list or anything to cross-check. I basically just pointed them in the direction of the hall and made a few flattering remarks to the ladies. So if the tables were more or less the same size as ours, there would have been about 40 people, give or take," Gabrielle said. "I can't remember the number of waiters, but I noticed 1 or 2 that came to our table, and there were a few uniformed staff standing behind the buffet spread. Those are a lot of suspects." She suddenly felt all eyes on her, and Sandra beamed. "Are we going to investigate this? You got a taste for it?" "Say no more, I will be your very able assistant," Sandra said with a wink. Gabrielle was about to put her off the idea, then thought that it could be helpful if Sandra and the others believed it was the robbery she was looking into. It would be easier to ask them questions. She was not going to let anyone know about Antonia for the time being. Well, one should be able to attend parties safely, and if one of the guests is behind the robbery and the shooting, he or she should be apprehended, Gabrielle said. Things could have gone horribly wrong. And Sandra, they took your bag. I'll start working on a new collection in about 2 weeks, but I'm afraid I won't have time to design a new one for you. An audible gasp was let out by the woman being addressed. No. It's evident that the police need help. Mark will need a list of the guests, the name of the party planning company and the seating arrangements. There's just no way that someone can enter a private property and get away with... Sandra appeared to notice all the eyebrows raised in her direction. Shooting us, of course. Gabrielle's phone started to ring. Sorry, I have to take this call. Very good idea, Sandra. Gabrielle left the room. The call was from one of her directors about an issue with the London boutique that needed her attention. When she hung up, she turned and almost collided with Alex. We never seem to be able to talk. I mean, really talk. I figured that now's as good a time as any, Alex said. Gabrielle nodded, a sinking feeling starting to form in the pit of her stomach. She found herself uttering a prayer for wisdom. She had to be careful with her words. Alex was no fool. She had avoided the conversation since her return, but she knew it could no longer be put off. I need to know where we stand, Alex began. Things seem to be going well for some time, but suddenly you put distance between us, and it can't still be work. You're back now, but I can't even remember the last time you called me. No, that's not true. I remember vividly. What's going on? Does Annabelle have anything to do with this? Gabrielle frowned. Who? The South African model, the one that joined us on our last date. Alex clarified, observing her. Suddenly the recollection came upon her. Ah, the woman you dated for 6 months that invited herself and her companion to our table and monopolised the whole conversation. No, it didn't bother me, Gabrielle replied. Really? Because that was the last time we were alone together, so I can only conclude that it gave you a false impression about the situation, Alex replied. Alone, or what one could call alone, we were not. And no, really, it did not upset me in the least, Gabrielle replied. I've always thought that the goal of courtship is to study the other person and decide if one wants to spend the rest of one's life with said person. Had you wanted to restart your relationship with Annabelle, it would have been hurtful, but I'd have considered it an answer to my prayers, and in the long run, in everyone's best interest. All one has to be is honest and not play games. Also, from what I saw, the interest was quite one-sided, so it was more amusing than anything else. It was, so following your logic, I'd made the choice to be there with you, not her, Alex said. What's going on with you then? In the spirit of honesty, I'd like a straight answer. Gabrielle paused for a moment. In the time she had been seeing Alex, there had been a lot of transparency between them, and she had felt at ease with him. Still, she could not tell him the reason why she had taken the decision to walk away. She just couldn't. Difficult as it was, she had to be firm and not give away any information. Every sentence or phrase that comes to mind feels like it's been used one too many times. But I can't do this right now, and it's not about work, she said. One can always find a moment. But I'm the problem. I just have too much going on, and I can't split myself into more pieces. It's not you or anything you've done. I just can't continue seeing you in a romantic way. And I think the sooner we move on with our lives, the better. I'm sorry. I tried to avoid this conversation because I think you're a very special man. But you're right. You deserve an answer, and the only one I can come up with short of lying is this. Alex, you deserve someone who can give you what you want. It just isn't me. She looked at him squarely, reading the incomprehension in his eyes. Seeing that he was about to speak, she excused herself and walked in the direction of the front desk. George would probably console Alex by calling him another victim of the Ice Queen. Gabrielle smiled bitterly to herself. Maybe this was how she was meant to remain. Alone. To stay up to date with Patricia Asedegbega's work, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications.